give this a try and see if this works. Just going to bring it up closer to the front.
Are they
on? I sent them the link. Hopefully they're still there. This is not going to be as good as the Mevo camera.
Well, and they can.
But
Yeah, there's no email back.
So how you doing? You all done with the article? Okay, great. Okay, so what are your first impressions? What did you like about it? What questions do you have?
I thought it was interesting that only, I think it said 32% of fourth graders are reading at proficient or expected level. So it kind of made me think that if only 32% fourth graders are reading at that level, is that, even though it's the expected level, is that really fourth grade level if only 32% are reaching
a real
it?
expected
Yeah.
level, right?
And I work with a lot of students that, like even coming on graduation, they probably read at a 7th or 8th grade level and they still go on to be successful. So it just kind of like made me think of a lot of like the students that I work with, and are we expecting a little too much of them? And is that why we're seeing a lot more of these disabilities, like reading disabilities?
Or do we adapt and not expect, because we have this population that's not truly proficient, do we make a lot of adaptations as a result of that allows people to go on and do other things? Because I think that data, and again,
that was dated data, I believe.
But it's consistent. If you look at the NAEP data that gets taken every 4 years, I think that number has remained sort of static. That we'll have like somewhere between 28 and 32% of kids who are not proficient. And if you think about that, if you think about the kids that we work with that have disabilities, think about all the things that we do to either adapt the curriculum, modify the curriculum, and then when we modify, we start changing the expectations. So kids that aren't proficient still go on, and we don't necessarily do what we need to do to change their level of proficiency. We just change the demand for them.
I'm curious too, where they, again, just thinking where they find this level of proficiency, because if not even 50% is reaching proficiency, maybe those others are advanced, and I don't know. That just thinking out loud that maybe like I said, maybe we're expecting too much, and yes, we have kids that are more like apparently 32% are more advanced, where you have the other 78% that are below expectations.
Right. I think the thing that I see, and you guys can tell me being also high school teachers, but in a different part of the state, what I see happening in high schools all the time, that especially in English classes, instead of being expected to read the book, lots of classes are reading the book aloud to the class. Now, that's not doing anything to change a kid's level of proficiency, but it has dramatically changed the expectation that we have for them and the level of complexity of the task. So I think that's something that we have to think about too. That's not a good practice. We shouldn't be doing that. But if we know that we have kids who are coming into our classrooms that are significantly below where they should be, what should we be doing so that they can access that text and learn at a higher level? Any other impressions, takeaways, things you found useful?
There's an interesting comment about what if they were employed somewhere,
Yes.
and the employer asking, well, basically, you have the answer for it. And there was it was an interesting juxtaposition to what's happening in school. So it was definitely something that left me thinking.
Right. And again, I probably could find data for this, but I know for a lot of our kids, especially those who have IEPs, I can't talk about the kids who aren't proficient that don't have IEPs, but a lot of our kids who have IEPs and are not proficient readers, even if they graduate and are accepted into a secondary level setting, a post-secondary setting, the numbers of kids who don't make it through that setting, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year, is very high. So they maybe get accepted into college, but they don't finish.
But I think going back to what you were saying is, so I think it's a two-pronged. Are we teaching our kids how to establish strategies and use those strategies that they can use throughout the rest of their life, as well as are we also approaching the reading issue itself? So and that's what I liked about this article, is that he talks about, we have remediation, but we also have like compensation. And I don't think the two negate each other. And that, while we're working on compensatory strategies, we still can be working on remediation. But I mean, the goal, when I talk to friends of mine that work at the college level in the support centers, one of their biggest complaints is that kids come in from high school and they don't know how to do their own compensatory strategies. They're used to people doing it for them, so they've never logged into Bookshare, or they might not have an individual account. They've never searched for electronic text. They don't know how to do these strategies themselves.
Isn't helpful in that? Is that was the connecting piece between that? Like, when you're reading aloud, you're not giving them the skill. If the skill is to read independently, especially, I think it's just so different though. Like at the high school level, I just have a different perception now, because I'm like, they're leaving here. They have to be, as opposed to like at the elementary, which is probably very different.
Yes.
Right, but Carol Ann's point is correct in that even at the high school level, you still need to provide direct instruction and intervention for kids who are not reading at grade level, while giving them the tools that allow them to access that content in a way that allows them to interact with it in a deeper way. So if reading aloud to kids at the high school level, unless you're doing it for a very targeted purpose, is not a good strategy, period. So if I'm reading Romeo and Juliet and all I'm doing is reading the story aloud to the kids, or the play aloud to the kids, and stopping every once in a while to ask them some questions, I've done nothing either to make them better readers or to give them better access that allows them to interact with it in a deep and meaningful way. So I haven't done either of those things. And what happens a lot of times for kids who have significant problems in reading is that when I start reading aloud to you, because I literally can't follow along with the text at the same time, I just completely check out. So it's just a bad instructional practice all around.
Yeah, so I, ironically, in the last couple of weeks, I've been at quite a few high schools where that's what I've observed in English. And when I talk to teachers afterwards and say, you know, is the individual signed up for Bookshare, or is the individual signed up for Learning Ally? Do they have like access to electronic text? They're like, well, we don't need to worry about that because everything we give them, we read out loud in class. And I'm like, well, what are they gonna do in the classes where they're not reading out loud? Or what are they gonna do in college? Or what are they gonna do in the summer to access leisure books or things like that? So, while you may feel okay about doing it here in class, and I'm not saying yes or no, though I would be saying no. How are you increasing that student's skills beyond this class so that our goal always is, regardless of when that transition is from kindergarten to elementary to middle to high, is for our kids to be as independent as possible. So again, for me, the scary thing is that we're gonna have a lot of adults that are out there and either aren't working to their potential and don't know how to access materials or determine the best strategy. Part of that comes from a personal experience. I have significant learning disabilities. So for me, high school was the hardest because I'm pre-special ed law. So I had to figure out strategies that worked for me and spent many all-nighters doing it. So each level of education got progressively easier. And if you listen to Charles Schwab, who's just a phenomenal phenomenal speaker, he says the same things. So I want our kids to be able to figure out what the strategies are that work for them. So one of the things we put on here, kind of going ahead, is some of you may be aware of this, the Hey, Can I Try That? The decision-making guide. You know, I like to have kids in as early as elementary school help in that decision-making process. So again, I like how Dave Eddyburn talks about it when we look at the text modifications and things like that. It's very systematic. And I like kids to learn that process because one, if they come up with a strategy, they're probably going to do it more so than if I tell them this is a good strategy for them. But it also gets them thinking analytically because these are problems they're probably going to have for the rest of their lives to a greater or lesser extent. Certainly, I'm a much better reader now than I was in high school or middle school. But they're still going to have to be able to come up with strategies for the rest of their lives that will work for them. And assistive technology changes, so we all don't know the latest assistive tech, but can we do the investigative process to find that out? So
did you share this with all of us?
Yeah, you should have gotten it through an email.
I can share it with you.
Okay.
Can I just say, I agree with what you're saying, but I also disagree in a way. I think because I'm at the elementary level, kids are being read aloud to all the time, and that is good practice to hear a fluent reader because it depends on what the purpose is.
Exactly.
Is it a decoding or a comprehension? So I just didn't want you to make like a blanketed statement because it is very different at the younger level. I agree with, it's got me thinking about their IEPs, putting in goals and objectives that actually teach to the technology that they're using. Like I never thought to put that in, like one of the objectives, like to learn how to use Bookshare independently. That may be something going forward that I can start implementing.
And when you think about read alouds that are done at the elementary level, like you said, they're always done with a purpose. There's a reason why I'm reading this aloud to you. That doesn't happen as well at the secondary. It's an expediency.
Right.
No, I read this aloud.
I understand that, but the way you phrased it just sounded.
No, I specifically said because you need to have a purpose.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you. At the elementary level, it's totally different. And schools that are doing readers, writers workshop do that all the time. They pick, if they're not picking a whole book for a particular purpose, they're picking a particular strategy that goes well with a part of the book or a passage within a book. Yeah,
because I specifically tell parents to read to their kids.
Absolutely. And it's not that they're, because I taught high school for a long time, and there were times where we would do read alouds of even a children's book. But again, there was a purpose for that. Right. It wasn't that because you can't read it, I'm going to read it to you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I look at, a couple of my kids are reading out loud right now, and I forget the book. It's a really cute book. But they're doing it for perspective taking because they have a really tough time. They're on the spectrum. So perspective taking is really difficult for them. So kind of doing a read out loud play type of thing where we've gone through it a couple of times has really helped them look at perspective taking from the characters in the story. So.
A couple of things that I thought were really great about this article and sort of overlap with the other article that we gave you as a resource on that document that you have is the table that's on page 2 of this article has the different strategies and some resources. And we can take a look at some of those resources, but then also on page 3, the taxonomy of text modification strategies. We'll also take a look at some of those tools that allow you to do that. But I like how it helps you look at the problem. What's the problem? And what's the cause of it? And then maybe what can I use to remediate that?
So it's basically taking you through the steps of reading AT evaluation, and that we need to look at what is the problem due to. So it's not just that Joey has difficulty reading, but let's be a little more specific and kind of get down to the why. And I just think it's a great discussion to have as part of a team, and it could be something that you have at a team meeting and then discuss at the IEP meeting, or it could be at the IEP when parents bring up, what other strategies can we try, really kind of narrowing down and then coming up with a plan. So being more systematic, and not that, well, we're reading to all the kids type of thing. So, yeah. So the other thing that Lisa mentioned that we gave you the link for, this is a whole chapter, so we're not going to do a read it now type of thing, but it's from
Wadi.
Wadi? Okay.
Yeah.
So Wadi is the Wisconsin Assistive Tech Initiative. I don't know if it has the link on here, but if you just do Wadi in assessing students' need for AT, it's a whole book in it. So they have a lot of phenomenal stuff. So the other link we gave you for the Hey, Can I Try That? That's another Wadi form. They received federal funding many years ago. So they really were, Wadi in Texas were really kind of in the forefront of the whole assistive tech and consideration process. As far as I know, everything that Wadi's done is available to the public to access. So you can search through them. So this kind of takes you also through that whole assessing and looking at different strategies in reading. So it gives you a lot of nice examples.
Gives you a nice flow chart from all the different types of reading adaptations that you can make, from going from just the book as it is to making some low-tech adaptations all the way up to text to speech. And then for each of those areas, it spends quite a bit of time talking about low-tech to high-tech adaptations and the reason for those and how they benefit. And we're going to take a look at some of those examples, but it'll go from everything from highlighter tape all the way up to text to speech. And it's funny now because it seems like highlighter tape is kind of a thing of the past.
I still have it.
Yeah,
I just
good.
used it the other day.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I still use it.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
I like also the erasable highlighters. So you can't always find them. Usually they're in the Crayola department at Staples or things like that. Because somebody mentioned earlier learning how to take notes. Like that is the hardest thing for our kids. It's still kind of hard for me. And I think back to college when it's the first time we owned books that my books were yellow. I mean, I might as well have said, highlight only the unimportant stuff because I thought everything was important. It was really hard to synthesize information and determine what's important. And that's hard for a huge amount of our kids, especially kids with executive functioning or autism. So I love the erasable highlighters if we're doing a paper and pencil type of thing, because then we can look at it as a group and say, well, is that really the key point? If not, we can erase it. But that's one of the things that I think we can now do electronically with so many of the tools, is do the highlighting, look at, the highlighting tools in Read and Write for Google Chrome, to help also with the organizational strategies and things like that. So, and it's a lot easier to erase electronically than it is with paper and pencil. So, but my highlighting takes at home right next to my couch.
We, like for digital, we use a lot of Read and Write.
Yes.
And that also, that helps with the text
Oh
to
my
speech,
gosh,
or speech to
yeah.
text, and also if the kids want to highlight something that they can color coordinate. it.
Right, I love the
Like
color
that.
coding.
And it's nice that like most of those features are completely free.
Right. So, well, the text to speeches, the color highlighting does not stay.
It is for the first 30 days.
Yes, but after
Yeah.
that,
And then I know our district, if a student needs it, they will, they'll get them
right.
a subscription for it.
So quite a few districts, which I'm really happy to say, have purchased it district-wide.
Yeah.
So you go in and South Windsor, I know this year purchased it. And I think in part because I was suggesting it's for so many children, because you reach a point where it's just cheaper to buy, a school-wide or a district-wide license. But
We don't.
yeah, so quite a few
Yeah, they
districts
have
have
so
one
many
district-wide.
licenses of it.
And it's
They
really
should, though.
cool because you'll go into a district, a friend of ours works in a district where they've had it district-wide for a while. And, she talks about going into a class and she's like, all the kids are using it. You don't know who's regular ed, who's special ed, and they'll all key each other in on other, hey,
Yeah.
did you know it could do this? Or,
Especially now that we're moving to the one-to-one in the high school program,
yes.
middle school.
yeah. So I love that fact that it's just becoming a tool that everybody can use, which is really exciting. I do love the color coding, highlighting, and I don't know if they still do it, Christina, but years ago when I was in one of the technical schools, when the kids came in as a freshman, they taught them a color coding highlighting system. So all the kids had 5 color highlighters, and each color was for a different type of fact. So
They still do that at the tech schools,
Yeah,
I used to teach
yeah.
at tech.
So I loved that. I'm like, why isn't everybody doing this? We should start this color coding in elementary school. So as we're analyzing text, kids are just used to, they kind of have that cue. Well, it's pink, it must be, a person or a place or whatever. So I loved that they were doing that, because then the transition from Read and Write to that or back and forth is just such a nice one. Yeah. Yes.
It's funny, we just had a team meeting and it was like a lot of the special kids are resistant to use the technology because they think they'll stand out.
Right.
So I suggested, why don't we have a tech day where everybody uses the same
Excellent.
tech
Yeah.
every day, and then everybody learns it,
Yeah.
they can help each other with it,
Yeah.
and it becomes normal.
Yes. Right.
And so I was really pleased that they were like, oh, that's a really good
Right.
idea.
Right.
So, and it's important
It's
because
absolutely right. It's absolutely. A friend of mine is an AT person in Glastonbury, and years ago, for that very reason, she started a class at their high school, and they just call it Cool Tech. So she goes in and she teaches one of the computer classes. I don't know if it's computer literacy or whatever, once a week to all the kids. And she has a cool tech tool each week that she highlights so that all the kids learn about it. So one might be Rewordify, which all the regular ed kids I show that love it. All the regular ed teachers I show love that. And it's just a tool, that's there. And I'm like, I'm like, Lauren, you're brilliant, because
it
I
just
mean,
makes
that's-
it more normal.
well, that and when all the kids are using it, they're gonna teach the teachers. So, and a lot of times I would show the kid the tool before the teacher, because then the kid's all excited about it and they'll show their friends and they'll, yeah. But
And
absolutely.
Rewordify is nice, but there's another one too, Auto Summarizer. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah,
that.
so that's
I love
actually,
that one.
so, and we can put your name on the list later. And some of you might have it, but we have a 35-page handout that Nicole, Natalie, and I have taken years to develop that are free digital tools for struggling readers and writers, but a lot. So before you leave, we'll just add your, I'll pass it on my laptop and you can get a link to that. And it's funny because I've been doing workshops on that for the special ed departments in a variety of school districts. And they called me up and they said, you know, the regular ed teachers came to us and they'd like you to do a workshop on all those tools you've been showing the special ed teachers. So I was like thrilled to death. I just presented to their entire English department. So, yeah.
So do you want to start going through some of the tools from low to high?
Sure.
So we talked a little bit about standard text and use of the highlighter tapes and different things like that. But Carol Ann brought some adapted books. Have you guys all seen adapted books before?
So these are depending on the level. Don Johnson has a whole series of start to finish series that are at different levels.
That's not what I meant.
I'm
sorry.
Low-tech.
Yeah, the low tech ones. I thought we would start low tech and then go.
Okay, yep.
So these are commercially made books, but these are books that you can also make on your own. So I'll just get out a couple of these and let you take a look at them. But what you'll notice is that there's ways to customize them and interact with the book. Have you guys seen books like this before? Have you ever made one?
That's what I was thinking of, was for alternate route to special ed.
Right, you want to tell everybody about that?
Well, we just, like, mine was, I had one page where they could actually use a highlighter and erase it. They could take things and, like, stick to it. Then they had sensory pages. So it was like I'm trying to think, my brain died, but it was very multi-sensory approach for the kids to be able to access the curriculum.
Right. So, like I said, these books that we're showing you, you can buy already done. And when you look through them, you see that there's things that you can remove and replace. So if I were reading with the student, I could say, look, the student is carrying a bag. Can you find the bag? And the student can pull that off and put it back on. Or here's Susie. Susie's going to school. Can you put Susie next to the school? And the student can interact with the text like that. But it's really pretty easy to make one of these. And what you can do is you can take any book. So say you like Where the Wild Things Are, which is one of my favorite books of all time. You just have to have 3 copies of the book because
Because sometimes when you cut out a prop on one side, you're cutting out a prop on the other side.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So you do need to have multiple copies of the book. So generally people will find books that aren't really expensive, so you can get multiple copies. And then you can cut out parts of the book, like Carol Ann is saying, that you want to emphasize or make sensory or focus on specific vocabulary. And then you just need to, I'm standing right in front of the camera, and then you just need to make these, laminate them and use the Velcro so that you can use them over and over again. And usually what you do is just 3-hole punch them and use the little rings that you use for 3-hole punching. And that way, instead of having this spiral bound, I suppose some schools have this, but it's an easier way to do it. Or you can just stick the pages inside a plastic sleeve and put the Velcro on top of the plastic sleeve. And then that way that can be written on and erased as well.
So, I was just going to say, when I adapt like Lisa's talking about, I actually rip the books apart and I put them on a high contrast paper, because a lot of my kids with visual involvements, that helps key them in on where to look on versus if I hold the book in front of me, or if it's on something else, the contrast might not be high enough to know where to look. So,
Well, Lakeshore Learning too has the one, like they have the
The
Velcro
props.
board and the props and stuff and that.
I have
Like
the
my
props
niece and
for,
nephew love that.
cheap
I
and
also,
cheap.
I did the Hungry Caterpillar, and I just like made like a
Yeah.
pipe cleaner Caterpillar, and they, like, the kids have to select the different fruits and put them on and things like that,
So, on my Pinterest page, which we can pop up, but I have probably 10 different boards or more that are for adapted books. So I have some for specific categories, fall, spring, winter, summer, but I also have for specific books. And then I have links to adapted books for older kids. So the site